On Saturday, August the 1st, 1936, at 5:30 in the morning, Gladys MacKnight was finally given a moment to relax from the 8-hour grilling that she had undergone at the hands of police from 2 cities. There was blood on her blouse, her mother's blood, and blood on her knee. It didn't seem to bother her. "What do you want to say?" a reporter asked her. "I've told the police everything that I have to say." "Don't you feel sorry about what you've done?" "Of course, I feel sorry. Mostly, though I'm tired and I'm cold. It's cold in this building." All through her grilling by the police, she kept calm and she seemed at no loss now. Her eyes were dry. Lieutenant Masterson brought her sweetheart, Donald Whiteman, into the captain's room. "Hello, Don," Gladys said. He reached over to take her hand. She withdrew it quickly. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "I'm all right. How are you?" Whiteman said. "Okay, just a little bit cold. When do we eat?" The police officer interrupted her. "Do you sign this statement willingly and with full knowledge of what it contains?" "I know what's in it. Let's get out of here." The police officer then permitted the reporter to question Gladys. "You know what you signed, don't you?" continued the reporter. "I know what's in it. I told them the whole story," she responded. "Do you think that you'll be able to face your father and your little sister?" "I'm tired. I've been questioned enough. You haven't any right to ask me any questions." Her face twisted into a grimace. She stuck her legs out wide. She was wearing a blue split skirt and a white blouse. She wore the tennis shoes she had put on for the game, which her mother's murder had prevented. Above them were the tops of white half-socks. A policeman brought her tennis racket in from the car. "Is this your racket?" he asked. "Yes." "Why did you take it with you?" "I don't know. I guess I won't play any more tennis for a while." She picked up the racket and toyed with it for a minute. Then, it was taken from her. She looked disgustedly at the policeman who was tying an identification tag to it. The 2 youngsters were taken into the hall. A photographer asked her to smile. She bared her teeth. "Haven't enough of those things been taken yet?" she asked. But she posed willingly. "Are you going to ask your father to help you?" she was asked. "I don't know what I am going to do. That will have to wait until I get some sleep. It's cold out here in the hall. How about getting finished with those pictures?" The photographer was just finishing. "Okay, Toots," she said. "I'll be seeing you." She was taken downstairs to a prison cell. She swaggered as she walked. "How do I photograph?" she whispered from the side of her mouth to the photographer. "The freshest, boldest girl I ever saw," Captain McGrath said. "5 years ago, she would have been a gun moll." In contrast, Donald Whiteman, tall, broad-shouldered, and red-headed, was just a scared kid. Scared and sick. He sat in the detention room, chewing gum nervously and keeping his eyes down. "Why did you do it?" a reporter asked. "I don't know. It just happened all of a sudden. The first thing and the last thing I remember is when I grabbed Mrs. MacKnight. She never said a word. She only moaned when she reached the floor." "Didn't you know that you were killing her?" "I didn't know anything. After I grabbed her, everything went blank. I don't remember anything until we stopped in front of Doris French's house. Our friend and Gladys went upstairs." The reporter kept digging. "How did it happen?" "Gladys and I came home about 4:30 or 4:45. I don't remember. Anyway, we had bought some stuff in the delicatessen store, and we brought it home. When we got in, Gladys told her mother that she had a date to play tennis at 6 o'clock and that she wanted to eat right away." He continued, "Mrs. MacKnight said that dinner wouldn't be ready and that she'd have to wait for Mr. MacKnight and the rest of them to eat. Gladys said she wanted to eat right away. Mrs. MacKnight got angry and told her that, if she wanted to eat, she should make her own meal. Then what happened? Pressed the reporter. All of a sudden, they started to shout. Mrs. MacKnight went over to the table and picked up a knife. I got scared and grabbed her. After that, I don't remember what happened. Gladys had the axe and my hands were bloody and the whole floor was bloody. It looked like everything in the house was bloody. The next thing I knew, Mrs. MacKnight was on the floor. Did you say to Gladys, hit her again? I don't remember anything about it. After a while, I went upstairs and washed my hands. They were all bloody. I got the sink and the towel all bloody. When I came downstairs, Gladys was coming back into the house. She told me she had been talking to Mrs. Fury. Then she said, we better get out of there. I asked her how we could get out of there, and she said we should take the car. We drove off and stopped at Doris French's house. I was feeling sick. I started to get sick a couple of times, but I never got all sick. Then we started to drive down the boulevard. We started out for Easton. I'd been there before. We just drove along, and I didn't say anything, and she didn't say anything either. We just kept on driving. Then we came to the traffic circle at Somerville. I guess we stopped before that, too. We stopped a couple of times. Gladys said we ought to go back. I didn't have anything to say. I wanted to go back, too, but I was afraid that if I talked, I'll get good and sick. Gladys said, though, that we ought to go back, that we could think up a good story and tell it to the police. That's when we decided we'd say that Mrs. MacKnight hit her first. Then we started to come back. The cops stopped us in New Jersey. Did you and Gladys ever talk about killing Mrs. MacKnight? Asked the reporter. Only when we were fooling. I never meant it. Did you know that Gladys had such a violent temper? I don't want to say anything that might hurt her, Whiteman stated. Don't you think that confessing might hurt her? I don't know if I let her down already. I told the truth as well as I could. That's the best thing I could do for both of us. How do you feel about her? I still love her, admitted Whiteman. Were you two going to be married? Ultimately, I guess. You never talk definitely about anything like that when you're as young as we are. What do you think is going to happen to you? I don't know. I guess we'll have a tough time in court. They'll set us one against the other. I don't want to do anything to hurt her. I want to protect her. I don't know what I'm going to do. During this talk, Gladys was being questioned in the next room by Captain McGrath, and their voices could be heard. Do you know what she's saying in there? Whiteman was asked. I hope she's telling the truth, he said. That's the best thing for her.